And tonight, we delve into a tale of fear, loss, and an ancient malevolence hiding just beneath the surface. Prepare yourself as we take you on a journey through the labyrinth of both a cave and the mind. This is a story about the disappearance of a young boy and the dark, terrifying secrets that followed. I've never been able to forget the events of that day, and no matter how hard I try, they continue to haunt me. I was only 12 years old when I found myself in the infamous Johnson's Cave, standing at the entrance of the labyrinth, an ancient and twisted network of tunnels said to be too dangerous for tourists. It had been years since anyone had ventured past the main tourist routes. But something about the maze always fascinated me. Brandon, my best friend at the time, was the one who convinced me to go with him that day. He'd been hearing rumors from the older kids at school, whispers of strange happenings inside the cave, disappearances that went back decades. I didn't believe them, of course, but I couldn't resist exploring. We sneaked past the barricade, and soon we were deep inside. The moment we crossed into the maze, something felt wrong. The air grew colder, the walls tighter, and the faint hum of electricity from the lights above grew faint, as if the cave itself was trying to keep us inside. We wandered deeper, the light from our flashlights flickering in the growing darkness. Brandon kept pressing forward, his excitement and curiosity pushing us both further into the depths. But I started to feel something else, a presence, a feeling that we weren't alone. I wanted to turn back, but Brandon insisted on going deeper. We stumbled upon what looked like a sealed-off passage hidden behind layers of rock. It was then that I heard it, a soft whisper. My name. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then it came again, clearer this time. Matt. I called out to Brandon, but he was too far ahead. He didn't hear me. I felt an urge to follow him, but something told me to stay put. That's when I heard the whisper again, but this time it was more than just my name. It was someone else. Brandon, the voice whispered, but it wasn't his. I froze. Something was watching us. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as the darkness around me seemed to pulse. Before I could react, I heard Brandon's voice calling me back. I rushed towards him, but when I reached him, he was standing by the sealed passage, his face pale. He looked at me, his eyes wide with fear. "What is it?" I asked. "I don't know," he whispered, "but something's down there. I can feel it." Suddenly, the lights went out. Complete darkness enveloped us. We fumbled for our flashlights, but in the pitch black, everything seemed disorienting, like the cave itself was twisting around us. I don't know how long we wandered, but eventually the lights flickered back on. By then, I had no idea where we were. The maze had shifted. What should have been a simple path was now unrecognizable. We ran into a dead end, and that's when I realized we weren't alone. A figure appeared at the far end of the tunnel, a silhouette in the dim light. It was like looking into a mirror of myself, but older, darker. The figure began to move toward us, its presence suffocating. Brandon tried to run, but I couldn't move. I couldn't look away from that thing. It was like it was pulling me in, as if it had been waiting for us. I knew we had to get out, but I couldn't find my way back. The figure, whatever it was, kept coming, and I could hear Brandon's breath getting faster, more erratic. He started yelling, calling for help, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I was paralyzed. I knew in my gut that it wasn't really Brandon anymore. It was something else. Something that wanted us both. I snapped out of it when I heard the faintest sound, a distant voice calling my name. It wasn't Brandon. It wasn't the figure. It was someone else. Someone I hadn't heard in years. And suddenly, I knew what I had to do. I grabbed Brandon's arm and pulled him, dragging him along as I forced myself to run. We found the turnstile, and somehow I managed to push us through the barrier and into the main path. When we emerged from the cave, the first thing I saw was the police officer standing with his back to us. He looked confused, but when he turned and saw us, he rushed over, relieved that we were alive. They'd been looking for us for hours, and Brandon's parents were already on their way. We were taken to the park office, where I explained what had happened. I told them about the voice, the figure, and the strange, unexplainable feeling that came over me in the labyrinth. But the real shock came when they checked the records. The ranger who was supposed to be watching the cave had been distracted by a woman on her way out. While his attention was diverted, Brandon had slipped past him and entered the labyrinth. When he passed through the turnstile, he hit the button to rotate it back into place, erasing any trace of his passing. They launched a full investigation, and that's when they found the sealed-off passage I had seen earlier, the one that led deeper into the maze. Brandon's parents insisted on breaking down the wall, convinced that he had found a hidden passage, and when they did, they found him. Brandon was dead. I wasn't surprised, though. By then, I'd already pieced it together. Whatever was in that cave wasn't just a ghost or a trick of the light. It was something alive, something that had been there for far longer than anyone realized, waiting for unsuspecting victims to wander into its grasp. As I pieced together what happened to Brandon, I realized that the first 3 boys who disappeared had been lured in the same way. And when they stopped venturing into the cave, it had adapted. It had begun drawing people in. As soon as it had taken one, it didn't stop. I wasn't shocked to learn that Brandon had died when they found him. I had already known. The tragedy of Brandon's death led to the cave being sealed once again. For years, the labyrinth remained closed, and it seemed like it would stay that way forever. But now, the town is talking about reopening it. The economy has been struggling, and there's talk of bringing back tourists. Some even want to open the forbidden passage. I went to the town hall meeting to speak out. I begged them not to reopen the cave. I warned them about the thing lurking inside, but they didn't listen. They called it an old ghost story, nothing more. In defeat, I told them one thing before I left: never turn off the lights. But maybe they were right. Maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe the grief of losing my best friend had made me see things that weren't there. So, I went back to the cave one last time. I stood at the entrance, where workers were still trying to break through the concrete. I pressed my ear against the wall, and I swear I heard it. A gravelly whisper, layered with Brandon's voice. It was calling me back. Thank you for listening to tonight's story. Remember, some places should stay hidden, and some voices should never be heard. Until next time, keep your lights on, and stay safe in the dark.